Character is definitely something that can be taught. Yes, to a degree, you're born with a certain level of, well, you're born with certain characteristics. At least it seems to be that way in my experience and with people that I've spoken to, mainly with parents. When I ask parents about their children, or when I ask my mother about me, she tells me that for the most part, I've always been the same way. And she says that with a lot of her children. Personality, again, is something that's different. Meaning, how do you express your character? How do you create your personal reality in the medium that you use to express your character? But for example, you have some people that may not be naturally inclined to tell the truth. And over time, they see the benefit that comes along with telling the truth and the detriment that comes along with lying. And so they may adopt a different characteristic, the characteristic of honesty, even though it wasn't one that they were actually born with, quote unquote. I definitely think that characteristics can be taught. And like they say all the time, when you go through certain hardships in life, it builds character. So even if you have a certain characteristic naturally, it can still be built, meaning it can get stronger over time. And if you don't have that characteristic naturally, you can be taught that characteristic over time by doing something that builds character. So I definitely believe that character can be taught.
A lot of notions always made about certain characteristics, traits that you need in order to succeed, being confident, being upfront, being polite, kind, warm. To what extent do you agree with that?
The number one characteristic that I've noticed in every accomplished person is ambition, not warmth, not being nice, not being confident. Because a lot of people aren't confident. A lot of people are not running toward their goal. A lot of people are running from their past. A lot of people are driven by fear. A lot of people are driven by pain, by anger, by hurt. They're not driven by confidence. It's the fear that makes them go for the thing. It's the fear that makes it seem like they're bold. They're not really bold. They're afraid. Not every person is nice. Not every person is kind, that's successful. Steve Jobs was not known as a kind person. Even Bill Gates in his early career was not known as a kind person. They were just doing something that was interesting, and so people wanted to be a part of it. And they were executors. They got things done. And oftentimes with people that are very accomplished, not really connected to the people that they work with. They're connected to the thing that they're trying to accomplish. So they disconnect from people very quickly because the people they were tools. And once you use a tool for what you need it for, you put it down, you move on to the next thing. All of the other characteristics that romanticize being accomplished to make the person who accomplishes things seem attractive aren't consistent. The one thing that's consistent is ambition. And some people call it hunger. It's ambition. Some people call it heart. It's ambition, not stopping. Going for it, not taking no for an answer. All of them. At some point, ambition, heart, and hunger become synonymous with one another.
Back home, I was going back to the book, Art of Seduction. That really, shyness is, nobody's really shy. You are, maybe some are more inclined towards it, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a choice to be shy, because that is when you ruffle the least feathers. That's when people are thinking they'll be the most liked. But nobody was born that way.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. Well, Robert Greene he's a scholar. He's a great researcher. So chances are he has more fact to back up that statement than I do. I don't know if that's true, because my experience doesn't support that. Whether it be my personal experience with the child, or again, having conversations with parents and asking them about their children. Not just parents, but also grandparents. So you can ask a grandparent about their child and their child's child. So they can kind of see lineage, and they know themselves pretty well by that point. So they can see what's quote unquote in the blood and what isn't.
You also spoke about like if you're shy because of those reasons, really you want to be more bold. That boldness is really something that gets rewarded.
Depends on what you're looking for.
I guess this is more in the I guess this is more like in the romantic field.
Depends on who it is. Is it male or female? And again, there's a tribe for everyone. Some people are turned off by people that are bold. Some men see women that are bold, and depending on how bold they are, not just how bold they are, but how they go about being bold, they're perceived as masculine. In Western society, chances are bold would fall into or fall under being a masculine trait. So if a woman is being bold, there may be a plethora of different types of men that would not be attracted to her because they perceive that as masculinity, and vice versa. There are some women who aren't attracted to men that are bold. They perceive that as toxic, or it's perceived as the trait of a predator, and to be predatory is to be toxic. So it's actually a turnoff to a lot of people. Some people see being bold as being arrogant, depending on how you do it. So it really depends on the person, and it depends on what you're looking to get.
Yeah, that's a good question, because the book really speaks about how to seduce a target. It doesn't really speak on like maintaining a relationship. It's more like how to be almost like a womanizer.
But even in actually seducing someone, if the person is not attracted to you being bold, then that's actually a turnoff from the very beginning. So you're not actually seductive to that person. But then there's a twist to it, because you could be bold at being shy. You can be unapologetically shy. And essentially that's what being bold is, being unapologetic. So you can be unapologetically shy. So there's levels to it. There's layers to being bold. And there's context to it. And everyone is not attracted to the same context. Let's say you have two different people who experience each other in a multitude of different contexts or contexts. They may not like each other in one, but they'll really be attracted to each other in the other. Because in one context, they're not necessarily looking for certain characteristics, whereas in another context, they are.
I think it's also difficult to write a book about seduction because different things seduce different people.
Exactly. But perhaps those people not only understand themselves, but they also, well, part of understanding themselves is knowing which realms or amongst which tribes they do better with. And so they dwell within those arenas. In my experience, very few people who do well in most or all areas. Usually there's a niche or multiple niches, but maybe not most niches, and definitely not all niches, where a person does well, where a person is considered to be attractive. I remember when I was in modeling, they have this concept of certain people having a universal look. In other words, is when you're mixed, or you can come across as being mixed, and you're of a fairer complexion. So if you're light-skinned with a mix of features, some features are very fine, other features are rather full, curly hair. It's not too much volume, but it's not straight. Hazel eyes, or honey, like a honey complexion. Like your eyes have like a honey complexion. It's not exactly dark brown, but it's not exactly light brown. There's this like spot where it's almost like in the middle. Regardless to which ethnicity you're from, meaning the audience is from, chances are they'll think that this person is attractive because this person falls right in the middle. They kind of have a bit of everyone. And because they have a bit of everyone, they're seen as having a universal look because we're attracted to what's familiar in most cases. But even that person is not attractive to everyone. Even that person has a niche or multiple niches, but it's not all niches, even though it's marketed that way. The idea is if you have a bit from everyone, or seemingly having a bit from everyone makes you more marketable across different ethnicities and nationalities. And because they use that criteria, they'll give it a name like universal, the universal look. In fact, that name is probably not very fitting, but it gets the point across. Although it's not exactly true. And that's the case with seduction. You have some people that seem to be universally attractive, but that's not true. Chances are they just have more options than others, but everyone does not like them. Everyone is not seduced by them. And over time, they learn who is, who isn't, what kind of person responds well to them, what kind of person they're attracted to, where they're likely to find that person. And those are the areas that they frequent. So it may look like they just have so much success everywhere that they go, but they're very strategic about where they go, even if it's on the subconscious level.
It's also funny to see that when I was interested in that world of like how people like how dudes like picked up girls and whatever. Some of them were really good at it. Like they could just be out on the street and just like seduce out of the open. But even then, they said like people were like experts at it. They really had like a conversion rate of like maybe 30%. And those were like,
those are high numbers.
which is funny because same with basketball, it's like the most elite 3-point shooters are like 40%.
Yes.
So it's like a number, it's like a numbers game.
Yeah. A lot of things in life are numbers, are based on numbers. But the percentage being high doesn't mean that it's the majority. Right? Like 40% is not the majority of 100%, but it's still a high percentage in context. That goes to show that even the best is not universal. And even if you look at athletes like NBA players that have a high shooting percentage, it's usually from the same spot or the same few spots. He's going to go to the left. Left-hand side, he does really well. Not so good on the right-hand side. Even baseball players doesn't do too well at bat when it's a curveball, but he does really well with sliders. He does really well with fastballs. It's all about context, because that's the only way communication makes sense. Communication doesn't make sense without context. And when you're seducing someone, you're communicating with them. So if you're not communicating with them in the proper context, you're probably not going to get very far with them. They're probably not going to understand what you're saying and be able to connect with it. There's some people that do really good at taking people home from the club. They don't do so good at taking people home from the library. It's a different context. At the club, I want to see how well you're doing. At the library, I'm interested in how smart you are, how intelligent you are. How many of these books have you read? Not how many of these bottles you can buy. It's a different experience because the context changes.